They said they were hunting witches. But what they were really hunting was fear. The year was 1692. A small, isolated village. Wrapped in snow, silence, and suspicion. One whisper could destroy a life. One accusation could end it. There were no demons. No spells. No curses. Only people. People who were terrified of being different. People desperate to be seen as pure. People willing to sacrifice their neighbors just to protect themselves. The Salem witch trials did not begin with magic. They began with a lie. And once that lie took root, there was no way to stop the fire. In Salem, the night did not belong to the innocent. When the church bells stopped, the darkness spoke. The villagers believed that the devil walked among them. Not as a monster. Not with horns, fire, or wings. But as a neighbor. Someone who smiled. Someone who prayed. Someone who sat beside you in church, but carried sin under their skin. They believed the world was a battlefield. God on one side, Satan on the other. And every soul was a prize. The ministers preached of hell as if they had walked through its gates. They described flames so real that children woke screaming in the night. And in the winter of 1692, when the wind howled through the wooden cracks of their cold homes, fear grew like mold in the walls. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the unseen. Fear of themselves. The villagers believed that if even one person in the town was touched by the devil, their pure community would rot from the inside. And so they watched. They listened. They whispered names in the dark. Because in Salem, survival did not depend on being good. It depended on being more innocent than the person next to you. It began with two young girls, Abigail Williams and Betty Pears. They were only 9 and 11 years old. But in Salem, age did not protect anyone from fear. The winter was harsh that year. Food was scarce. The nights were long. The silence inside the small wooden houses was heavy and cold. The children spent their days indoors, listening to sermons, warnings, and the constant fear of sin. They were told that the devil was everywhere. That temptation could enter the body without warning. That even a pure heart could be stolen if God looked away for a moment. At first, the changes were small. Abigail's hands would tremble during prayer. Betty would stare at the wall without blinking, as though listening to something no one else could hear. But soon the small changes turned into something terrifying. The girls began to scream. Not normal screams. Screams that shook the walls. Screams that sounded like they came from somewhere older and deeper than a child's voice should reach. Their limbs twisted in unnatural angles. Their backs arched as though an invisible force was pulling them upward. They clawed at the floor. They shouted words no one taught them. They reacted violently to prayers and scripture. When God's name was spoken, they convulsed. When the Bible was opened, they cried out in terror. The villagers believed they were witnessing the devil at work. Salem was a deeply religious village. Everything unexplained was considered spiritual. Illness was punishment. Misfortune was a warning. A child's scream was a message from hell. The minister demanded to know who was tormenting them. And the girls gave a name. Tituba. A woman who lived in the household. A slave. A woman with dark skin, different beliefs, and a foreign past. She was the easiest person to blame. She was the one who did not belong. Tituba was dragged from her home. Questioned for hours. Threatened. Struck. Ordered to confess. The pressure was unbearable. And under fear, she broke. She confessed to witchcraft. She confessed to speaking with the devil. She confessed to signing her name in his book. But her confession did not end the fear. It multiplied it. Because she claimed she was not alone. She said others in the village had also made pacts with the devil. She said witches walked among them, disguised as ordinary women. She said the devil's influence was spreading. The villagers believed her. Not because the story made sense. Not because there was any evidence. But because fear does not require proof. It only requires a target. And once one name was spoken, others began to follow. Sarah Good. Sarah Osborne. Rebecca Nurse. Martha Corey. Women who lived differently. Women who were too quiet. Women who were too confident. women who did not fear the church as they were expected to. In Salem, suspicion was enough to destroy a life. A look held too long, a disagreement in the market, a rumor whispered behind a door, a misfortune that needed someone to blame. Cows died. Milk spoiled. A neighbor fell ill. And someone would say, "I saw her look at me strangely." That was enough. People accused others not only to survive, but to protect themselves. Because if you did not name someone, someone might name you. The accusations spread. The fear grew. The entire village turned into a stage of watching, pointing, reacting, accusing. The girls continued their fits in public. Each cry became evidence. Each convulsion became proof. The villagers gathered to watch them as though witnessing a holy sign. And with each scream, the fear in Salem hardened into certainty. The devil was among them. And someone had to be punished so the rest could feel safe. The hunt had begun. The fear did not stay inside Salem. It moved across fields, carried by footsteps, spreading from one house to the next. People began to speak in lower voices. They listened not to understand, but to catch any word that could be twisted, shaped, or sharpened into an accusation. Every conversation became a risk. Every silence became a shield. Every night felt like standing at the edge of something invisible, something hungry. The ministers preached more than ever. Sermons lasted longer. The church bell echoed across the frozen fields with a tone that no longer offered comfort. The church had once been a place of refuge. Now it was a courtroom. A place where lives were measured, judged, and condemned. The pews were filled with villagers sitting shoulder to shoulder, not out of devotion, but from fear of being absent. Not attending meant suspicion. Suspicion meant questioning. Questioning meant being accused. And being accused meant losing everything. Children memorized prayers not to understand God, but to prove they were untouched by evil. Women avoided meeting each other's eyes. Men kept their hands still and their words brief. No one wanted to be noticed. To be unseen was to be safe. And yet, no one was safe. The trials moved into the church. The accused were brought forward, hands bound, faces pale. They were surrounded by neighbors who once shared meals with them, once helped raise their children, once prayed beside them. But now those same neighbors stared at them with fear and disgust, as though they were no longer human. The girls who had begun the crisis were seated in the front, watched closely. Their reactions determined fate. The accused did not face evidence, reason, or proof. They faced performance. The girls would begin to cry, to shake, to scream, to fall to the ground, claiming invisible forces were attacking them. The villagers believed the accused were sending invisible spirits to torment them. A woman could stand silent and still, doing nothing at all, and yet be declared guilty because a child had fallen to her knees and screamed her name. The court accepted this as truth. They believed these reactions were messages from God. They believed they were instruments of divine justice. They believed the devil spoke through symptoms and signs. Some villagers refused to participate. They said there was no devil in these women. They said the girls were acting. They said something was wrong. But their voices were drowned by the louder fear of the majority. And those who spoke too strongly in defense became suspects themselves. Defending the accused was seen as a sign of shared guilt. And so silence spread even faster than fear. As the accusations continued, the trials grew more dramatic. More names were given. More families destroyed. More lives suspended in uncertainty. The community began to rot from inside. The bonds that had once held them together could not survive the constant pressure of suspicion. The fear had reshaped relationships. It had rewritten trust. It had planted seeds of doubt in every heart. The jail cells grew crowded. Women slept on cold stone floors. The air was damp, heavy, and filled with the smell of illness and fear. Some prisoners prayed, whispering their words into the darkness. Some lay motionless, staring into nothing. Some tried to convince themselves that God would protect them. But God felt distant in Salem. Heaven felt closed. The prayers felt unanswered. The families of the accused suffered as well. Crops were left unattended. Livestock became weak. Children wandered with no one to care for them. The fear did not just destroy those who were accused. It destroyed everyone around them. The entire village was being hollowed out, piece by piece. And yet, the accusations did not slow. They spread with a terrible momentum. One woman's name led to another. One confession led to 10 more. The court believed the devil's influence worked like a web. They believed they were uncovering a conspiracy. They believed they were saving their souls by taking the lives of others. People began to confess simply to avoid death. They gave names of others. They repeated the stories the court wanted to hear. They spoke of witches' gatherings, of spirits in the night, of signing dark books, of flying through the air. None of it was real, but the fear made it real. Fear gave shape to lies. Fear carved nightmares into truth. The social order collapsed. Respect did not matter. Reputation did not matter. The old women who had helped deliver babies, who had prayed at every meal, who had served the community for decades, were taken as easily as those who argued, those who resisted, those who stood apart. No one's life history protected them from accusation. The trials became a theater of suffering. People would watch as the accused were questioned. The entire community attended. The whispers never stopped. The children did not look away. They grew up learning that survival required silence. That truth was dangerous. That safety could be purchased with the suffering of others. The fear spread too far to stop. Even those who doubted did not speak, because doubt itself could kill. So the silence continued, and the machine of accusation continued to take new victims, one after another. The jails filled until there was no room left. The court did not stop. The community did not stop. The fear did not stop. It grew stronger with each fall of a gavel, each confession, each cry from the prisoners echoing through stone walls. People forgot the beginning. They forgot why the accusations had started at all. They only remembered the fear. They remembered the need to survive. They remembered that to point was safer than to be pointed at. Friendships dissolved. Families broke apart. The ties that connected the village snapped one by one. The community that had once worked together to endure harsh winters, to build homes, to plant crops, had turned on itself. Salem had become a place where life was weighed by suspicion and death was carried out in the name of salvation. The fear did not need to be logical. It only needed to continue. And it did. The turning point came when the court believed it had uncovered not just isolated evil, but an organized network. The idea that witches met in secret to plot the village's downfall took hold. The ministers said that the devil worked best through groups, through quiet alliances. So every friendship, every shared look, every whispered conversation became suspicious. If two women spoke by the well, others wondered what they were planning. If someone left their home late at night, others imagined rituals in the woods. The ordinary rhythms of village life were twisted into dark symbols. Innocent actions became evidence. Normal gestures were reinterpreted through fear. The girls continued to lead the accusations. They would fall to the ground, clutch their throats, say spirits were choking them. The villagers believed the accused were sending invisible specters to do harm. No one asked how a child could know such ideas. No one questioned why the convulsions only happened when certain people were present. The performances had become a language, and the community understood it without question. Every scream meant guilt. Every tear meant danger. Every sigh from the accused meant an attempt to hide the truth. As the trials continued, tension in the village grew unbearable. People could not sleep. Doors were locked at night. Lamps burned until dawn. Families sat together in silence, listening to the winter wind move across the rooftops, waiting to hear footsteps approach their door. No one wanted to wake to fists pounding wood. No one wanted to hear their name spoken in the dark. The sound of footsteps outside became the most frightening sound in Salem. Some families fled the village. They left behind their homes, their animals, their land, their memories. They moved through the forests in silence, hoping distance would break the fear. But even far away, the fear remained inside them. Others stayed but withdrew from community life. They avoided the market. They avoided the church. They spoke only to their own families. They lived as though hiding, even without being accused. The prisons grew more crowded. The space was never enough. The accused were chained to the walls or to each other. The chains cut into their wrists and ankles. The cold air burned their lungs. There was little food. The floor was damp. Some wept without sound. Some prayed until their voices broke. Some called out for justice. But justice had no place in Salem anymore. Justice was replaced by survival. Salem was never truly left behind. Because what happened there was not about witches. It was about people. It was about fear. It was about the moment when a community turns on itself to feel safe. That phenomenon did not end in the 17th century. It simply changed its shape. Today, we use different words. We no longer call someone a witch. We do not speak of demons or dark pacts. But the mechanism is the same. A single accusation, a single rumor, a single misunderstood moment is enough to turn the many against the one. What was once a courtroom is now a social platform. What was once a crowd gathered in a church is now a crowd gathered online. The tools have changed, but the instinct has not. People fear being wrong. People fear being judged. People fear being isolated. And so they join the accusation, because it is safer to point than to be pointed at. In Salem, a scream from a child could condemn a person to death. Today, a sentence on a screen can destroy a reputation, a career, a life. The punishment is no longer execution, but erasure. A person becomes untouchable, unspoken, unwanted. Their identity is taken from them, not by law, but by the will of the crowd. The villagers in Salem believed they were protecting their community. They believed they were righteous. They believed they were defending morality. The same belief exists now. People convince themselves that punishment is justice. That public humiliation is accountability. That silence equals guilt. But guilt is not determined by volume. Truth is not created by numbers. And morality does not belong to the crowd. The real danger is not the accusation itself. It is the speed at which it spreads. The speed at which people stop thinking. The speed at which fear becomes certainty. Salem is a lesson: when fear takes control, reason disappears. Compassion disappears. Humanity disappears. Salem reminds us that it is possible to become the villains of our own story while believing we are the heroes. That a society can harm the innocent while claiming to protect itself. That fear, when shared by many, feels like truth. But fear is not truth. The legacy of Salem is not the trials, nor the executions. It is the warning that still echoes centuries later. If we stop questioning, if we stop listening, if we stop thinking, then we will repeat the same tragedy again and again. Not with gallows and rope, but with silence and destruction. The witch hunt did not end. It simply found new language. And it is still here. We tell ourselves we would have been different. We tell ourselves we would have seen the truth. We tell ourselves we would not have joined the crowd. But history does not remember what we believe about ourselves. It remembers what we do when fear is louder than reason. So if Salem teaches us anything, it is this: before you judge, before you accuse, before you join the crowd, stop and ask, are you seeking justice? Or are you just trying not to be the next one burned? Silence. Fade out.